We had the Birmingham A's for a long period of time. We talked about that earlier this year. And he's the owner, if I remember correctly, that took the team from Kansas City to Oakland, right? He's the guy that took him out there.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And he was he was an innovator. He was advocating for orange baseballs, for designated runners, for, making it a more palpable product. He also was incredibly cheap.
Yep.
And I don't know how many lawsuits went between he and Major League Baseball during his tenure. He made two of the more famous trades that weren't approved. They were killed by the commissioner, where he sold players. He sold Vida Blue to the Yankees. He sold Joe Rudy and Raleigh Fingers to the Red Sox. And the commissioner overturned those trades for the good of baseball.
I remember you brought up the Oakland memory. I don't know why but the 90 World Series when the Reds swept them was just so shocking to me.
Well, I mean, think about those A's teams.
They were so good.
They beat the Giants, but they lose to the Dodgers and the Reds as better teams.
I know. I mean, they had the Bash brothers. They had Dave Stewart. They had Eckersley. I mean, that was such a good team, and it just seemed like that Reds team was just a ragtag group.
Yeah, and they also that A's team were sort of one at the core of what became the steroid era.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I remember Tony Gwynn, the great star for the San Diego Padres, telling me going in to do a workout in the Oakland weight room in spring training and seeing the amount of weights the players were lifting, and he was like, "Oh my God!" You had McGuire and you had Canseco and all those guys. I mean, they were an incredibly dynamic team with great players.
What do you say, everybody? With Clint Lamb, I'm Mick Gillispie. Time for Cover Crimson. Alabama and Georgia play on Saturday, 2 versus 4 in the world of college football, and here we are live. So thanks for hanging out with us, and happy birthday, man. I mean, I can't get into this without throwing that at you right now, but yeah, look at that. There it is. The birthday greetings.
Yeah, 34 years old, man.
Jeez, you're getting up there.
Yeah, I can remember when I was in some of these college players' days, man, having a good time. Things are different now, though. Like when you look at, obviously, the way you look at life in general is a lot different at 34 than it was at 18, 19, 20, 21. But Alabama's got a big one, man. I'll ask you again. I asked you yesterday. Now that we're 24
when I get
hours,
there, I guess I'll know because you tell me that.
Yesterday I asked how nervous you were. That was a Wednesday question. Now it's a Thursday question. As the game gets closer, are you getting more nervous about it, or are you feeling pretty confident?
I feel the same as I did before, but I think people that know me know that I'm nervous about every game. I just there's a part of this for me which is business, right? Us talking about Alabama, me being honest about the way I feel about Alabama, which would be right now pretty confident about the program and the recruiting and all of that stuff, which I do want to talk a little recruiting before we get out of here. But as far as like the fan part of it, I'm always nervous. I mean, it was when Nick Saban showed up that I got to throw out my lucky socks and my lucky shirts and all of that kind of stuff, because he kind of eliminated that. So I'm nervous about the game, but at the same time, I feel like I just don't see Alabama not showing up at home against Georgia.
That's where I'm at too. And here's the thing about it. College football nerds on Twitter, X, I guess now is what you got to call it, they brought up an interesting point. A lot of people are pointing to the Kentucky game, the last game that we saw Georgia play. They didn't play well. And they're using that as a reason to say Georgia's not as good as Alabama. Alabama's going to win. I mean, we've seen Georgia do this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've played poorly. The last 2 seasons, I think they're a combined 28-1. And they've had a lot of these games that are really close. You talk about South Carolina last year at home. It was a 10-point win for Georgia.
Right.
You look at Auburn last year. It was like, a 7-point win. You look at 2022, you have Missouri. That was like a 26-22 final. That was on the road. You had Kentucky that year as well, 16-6. That was on the road. And the thing about it is all 4 of those teams either finished under 500 for the season or were like, I think Kentucky in 2022 finished 7-6.
Right.
So my point is that Georgia has struggled in these types of games, but or not these types of games, but obviously, the game against Kentucky a couple of weeks ago, and it hadn't really impacted them when they've gotten on the field against quality opponents. So I don't think that should be a barometer to say how good Georgia is or isn't, because it's kind of been who they've been the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I look at it the other way. I mean, I kind of feel like you could say they weren't really motivated. They were looking past Kentucky to Alabama, and that could be a factor too. Maybe why they didn't play as well in that game. Also, they had some bad calls, I thought too, and you look back at that, and some of that stuff affects the way that a game goes down. But I think that when you're trying to coach and get the attention of these kids, they have that kind of game where you don't lose, but you feel like you lost. Then sometimes that's beneficial to them. The question is this. Maybe they aren't as good, maybe because they haven't played a tough schedule. I mean, let's just be honest here. They've had the light schedule. Alabama had some years where they had light schedules too, okay? And it wasn't that they didn't schedule. It was that by the time they played the teams, they weren't very good, and they went on to win national championships. But the last, the last 5-6 years, I think Alabama's played as close to an NFL schedule as you could. You talk about the year where they had to play at Tennessee and at LSU, which is what they're going to do this year. And you looked at those 5 road games that they played the year, the second, not last year, but the year before that. This is like 5 tough games, right?
Absolutely.
At Texas, and then the other ones. And then you look at Georgia, and they're playing like Missouri, and they're playing Vandy. That's not the case this year for them. So they may have there may be part of it may be the fact that they're actually going to play a very tough schedule this year. This is part of it.
Georgia doesn't have the SEC East anymore.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of it. You had the gauntlet in the West, and you had the SEC East, which was, you would get a couple of quality teams, but overall it just was nothing close to the West. The fact that they've kind of eliminated the divisions, that certainly played a part in the competitiveness of some of these schedules.
Yeah.
But, someone actually asked in the comments, SK, does UGA blitz Milroe because of USF's success? Mick, I don't know about you, but I don't think Georgia's one of those types of teams where they kind of are who they are. Mm-hmm. They're going to take some of the things, or maybe a recipe that someone else used that was effective. They might see some things on tape where maybe they can exploit it, but they're not going to be the type of team that's going to end up adopting another team's game plan going in.
Yeah.
That's just kind of not who they are. Now, what I will say is it did feel like in that 2021 SEC championship game, they weren't very aggressive, very vanilla defensively. I think they were really confident in their ability to beat Alabama with their struggles along their offensive line without having to do a lot or be super creative. And they knew they essentially had a mulligan where you're still going to make it to the college football playoff. And, what's fascinating about that, I wouldn't say it's a must win for either team. So do you think it's possible that maybe there's some things you wouldn't hold back in a game like this, right? No matter what.
You don't.
I mean, I agree. That thought crosses your mind, but then you're like, nah, I mean, I just don't think that is. But I will say Georgia will be a lot more aggressive in this game to their standard and how they play aggressive than they have been at least in 2 of the last 3 times. I think when they played Jalen Milroe last year, the 2 quarterback spies, that wasn't a very aggressive strategy.
Right.
But when they played Bryce Young and those guys in the 2021 national championship game in Indianapolis, it was a different Georgia defense.
Right.
And they were a lot more aggressive and had a lot more success. So I would expect more of that approach than what you've seen in the other 2 out of 3 times they've played.
I think they're going to be aggressive. I think they're going to blitz. I think they're going to try to put pressure in Milroe's face. This is an offense that we don't even know exactly what they do yet. Although we've seen that they're going to run the ball more with the quarterback, which I've said it before. They waited too long to do that last year. They didn't do it enough effectively. That is a huge part of what, as Kalen DeBoer says about Jalen Milroe, and I agree 110%, let him go play ball. Just go play ball. That's part of how he plays, is that he is a true dual threat guy. He beat you with the long ball, but also he can beat you with his legs. And he's big and strong enough to be able to do that. And do it effectively. So I think you're going to see that. We know that that's part of it. The RPO game, we know that's part of it. But I just feel like there's going to be the biggest problem, and I'm going to digress a second. The biggest problem I had with Bill O'Brien was I felt like there wasn't enough creativity. You and I did shows together. How many times did I say that throughout that season, right? Why did you not have more creative plays at Tennessee? Why did you not have them at LSU? In some of the games you even won, I didn't feel like they were creative. And then the last couple games of the year, hey, we're out of it now. Let's go ahead and be creative. Then last year I felt like Tommy Rees was kind of coming along. These guys are built for creativity. They've been at places where you have to be creative. When you're at Fresno State, if you're going against half the teams on your schedule or more, they're going to have more talent, so you're going to have to be creative, right? Washington last year, super creative with their offense. Now, they also had great playmakers, but part of that is you developing those guys into playmakers. So I'm looking for Alabama to take advantage of some of these wide receivers that we haven't seen yet. I mean, is Kendrick Law on the team anymore? Oh, he blocks now. Okay, that's got to stop. He's got to start catching the ball. Okay, I like the blocking part, but you're a receiver. I told you this yesterday. You're not a blocker. It's not like you're not offensive tackle. You're wide receiver because, as Nick Saban would say, don't give me the my bads. Receive the ball. So I'm expecting that we're going to see him. I think that we'll see Prentice. I think that we're going to have an offense that shows creativity, and who knows? Maybe it's a Robbie Oots who I love. I think there's a lot of weapons on this team that we haven't really seen utilized.
I mean,
does that make sense, though?
No, it absolutely does. Now, I will say,
you like the receivers blocking.
I think that's really important to this offense. I think the tight ends are blocking extremely well. I think
agree.
The wide receivers, the running backs, when they're being asked to block, even in some lead blocking situations, getting out there in front of Jalen Milroe, everybody's blocking their tail off. That's what you want to see from an offense. Now, that doesn't mean that needs to be your only role, but at the same time, it's been effective. And you got to understand, it's also a limited pass attempts, right? If you're going to, at this point in time, from what we've seen, and I almost guarantee you Jalen Milroe is going to end up throwing the football quite a bit more than in any other game that Alabama's played this year. I mean, that should be obvious. He's probably going to play all 4 quarters. There's going to be a lot of situations where he needs to throw the football. They're going to be a lot more, balanced, I feel like, between the passing game and the run game, even though the run game and being creative with it is certainly going to be a major part of what they're doing. I think that you kind of have to be a little bit more balanced in these types of games. But I think with Kendrick Law, that's one of those types of players where I think you can tell by the way he's being used, there's more to it. And I don't know, this might be
banged up or something.
Well, I mean, he could end up being banged up. It could be something where maybe they were holding back a little bit with him.
Oh, right. Gotcha.
And granted, this might not be the team that you pull that out against. Georgia might be set up well to stop whatever you've got in your back pocket for a Kendrick Law. Right. So I'm not saying he's the secret weapon. They're going to use him a ton. But it's just, I think it's a little bit too early. I've said about Kendrick Law, until further notice, essentially view him as one of Alabama's tight ends. Like, he's blocking like a tight end. He's the usage in the passing game, 3 targets in 3 games, plus 1 carry. He's not being used often enough where you can say he's a major part of the passing game, other than, when he's able to get out in front of some people, maybe, help create some yards after the catch for some of these other receivers. He's done that, and you got to give him credit for having that selfless mentality. Mm-hmm. But I think in this type of game, you need to attack Georgia in some ways that they're not anticipating or expecting. And you talk about the creativity of the offensive staff. What I will say about that, it's not gimmicky type of stuff. Like, it's using a variety of plays off the same looks where, you line up a certain way, and if you see players anticipating what's coming, you'll see Deontay Lawson on the defensive side. They'll be pointing out based off of formation, right, something that somebody's doing. They'll anticipate and know the play. You can't do that very often against Alabama's offense under Kalen DeBoer because they run such a variety of things off of any given formation or the way that they line up. That is very difficult to do. But we'll go ahead and get into the X factors. That's the entire point of today's show.
Yeah, you love this stuff, which I love when you love this stuff. Hey, interesting to me too.
We'll go. Do you want to go 1 on offense, 1 on defense, or do you want to go 2 on offense, 2 on defense?
I mean, I don't care. 1, 2, whatever.
We'll start off with 1 apiece and just see if there's a second one. But you go first.
You go first, because I want to hear what your first one is, and then I'll.
It's going to all depend on if he plays. but I think Quay Russaw is going to be a major factor in this game. I think the Bandits are going to play a part.
Yeah.
With LT Overton, with Jamarian Latham, both of those two guys, as far as the outside run, they're going to be a factor there. But when you talk about Georgia's offense, 67% of their run game has been to the outside, not between the tackles.
Right.
And so you have to have strong play out there on the edges, whether you're talking about that Bandit that's more built for that. But their role is typically a little bit different. They're not too often – playing a wide 9 or playing a 6 technique. They're more so, 5-4, 4-eye on the inside shoulder of the tackle, things like that. A guy like Quay Russaw, his ability to set the edge effectively against the run, which I think, a guy like Yanze Pierre, I thought he was a little bit more effective and better at that than I was anticipating when I saw him against Wisconsin. But Quay Russaw is easily the best guy that Alabama has at that particular, in those particular situations. So I think Russaw is going to end up playing a huge factor in this game, not just because of his ability to stop the run, but also the fact that he can provide a little bit of juice as far as the pass rush. He's the most balanced Wolf on this roster, and I think against a team like Georgia, that's going to matter.
That's interesting. Caleb Downs was a beast against these guys last year, and they tried to get him. They can you imagine Malachi Starks and Downs in the same secondary?
No, I really couldn't.
And they were this close. But he's at Ohio State. So, however that happened, and there's definitely a lot of discussions on that.
Are you saying that Caleb Downs dodged Alabama?
I think that no. See, I think that Ohio State made a deal that he couldn't refuse. But I think Georgia thought they had him, and they didn't. But what he did in that game is he helped take the boundary away. I mean, think about how many times he came up on those run plays and sweep the leg, Johnny. I mean, he's taking those guys out. Who's going to do that this game? Is that going to be Malachi Moore? Is that going to be Keon Sabb? Is that going to be somebody else, like you're saying? Maybe somebody from the Wolf position. I don't know. But if you want to beat Georgia, they're used to being bullies on that perimeter. And when they start turning the perimeter on you, and you got to worry about that, and then they start running between the tackles, you're done, right? Alabama took that away last year. So I think it's going to be one of those guys. I think it's going to be one of those guys that comes up, and I'll just say, hopefully Malachi Moore's ready to go with the concussions.
I think he will be. No, I mean, he wasn't even on the injury report.
Right, and he wasn't even on the injury report, which is something else I want to talk to you about before we get out of here today. But, yeah, I mean, think about that, man. I mean, if Alabama's able to take that away from those guys again, or at least make it tough on them, I feel confident in this defense.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Malachi Moore. I would bring up Keon Sabb as being a key guy on that front too. I think he has not been the best tackler, but it's not been from a lack of physicality. He's not a soft player.
Right.
I think at times he's been over aggressive. I think he's got to break down. He's got to wrap up, do a better job of being consistent with his tackling. I saw some improvement on that front against Wisconsin.
Right.
I didn't think he was nearly as good or effective at it against Western Kentucky and USF. But the reason that I would include Keon Sabb in this is his ability to play kind of that robber role underneath.
Yeah.
I think that's so crucial for a guy like Carson Beck, who we haven't really seen attack defenses vertically.
Right.
Having that guy underneath that can break them some footballs and maybe make some game-changing plays. Carson Beck is typically not going to be a guy that's going to turn the football over a lot, but I think if you're Alabama, if you can win the turnover battle at home, maybe avoid penalties, that's going to be another critical part of this. I think you can end up winning this football game, and not just winning, but if you had the right things go right, you can win pretty handedly. Not saying it's going to happen, but well,
it's happened before.
It has. Things can get away from
these
teams.
These guys get behind. They're so not used to playing from behind.
Absolutely.
They look like which has always been the issue with Kirby's offense to me, is that when they fall behind, they look like a turtle on its back. On its shell like this. Like they can't do anything. Well, and Alabama's been one of the only teams that's been able to do that.
Well, and to your point, this is where these are the types of situations where a Brock Bowers, or a Ladd McConkey would end up making the biggest difference.
Right.
Because if you did get behind, you would have the ability, you had trusted targets that you knew were going to make plays for you. Start feeding it to them, maybe nickel and dime your way down the field, get some points.
Yeah.
But, if you start talking about them getting down, their inability to push the ball vertically, and it's not that they're incapable. I think it's just that we haven't seen it. But I will say it just has not been a big enough part of their offense. I think there's going to be some opportunities against Alabama's defense on that front. I really do.
Right.
Because I think Alabama is going to probably put a little bit of an emphasis on the short to intermediate parts of the field,
right.
the run game. And so you would think, based off of how they play defense and the fact that they really like to stay with a single high safety, one guy over the top, I think that presents, some opportunities. We'll see if Georgia's able to capitalize on those. But a guy like Keon Sabb, man, I think he's going to play a really important role in the turnover battle on Saturday.
Hey, I hope so. All right, I guess we're switching to X factor on offense.
Yeah, and we'll stick with one. A piece. We'll get in, get out of here.
Go first.
Go for it.
We haven't seen him a lot, but Justice Haynes, this is like a big game for him, right? The legacy, get a chance to play against your in-state team. He's going to be ready to go.
Everybody thought he would be a Georgia Bulldog.
Right, everybody did, right? 5-star guy, super talented, and I just think that this could be a breakout game for him.
That's so interesting. I was actually going to go with Jam Miller. Mm-hmm. I didn't really think about the Georgia aspect. That's probably should be a bigger storyline than we're talking about.
Right.
Caleb Downs was that guy because he was right in line where everybody thought he was going to end up at Georgia. When they played Alabama in the SEC championship last year, everybody had that storyline with Caleb Downs. Justice Haynes wasn't really playing.
Yeah, right.
So you really didn't get that for him. But now he gets his opportunity in front of a home crowd against a team that, a lot of people, he has obvious connections to Georgia. And what I will say about, Justice Haynes, I feel like the inconsistencies with the interior of the offensive line, mostly against South Florida because you moved Tyler Booker out to left tackle. Geno Vandermark, I thought he did pretty good in pass protection against the Bulls. I don't think he was a great interior run blocker. I think as far as a lot of like the inside zone stuff, that is probably more Justice Haynes. Mm-hmm. He's going to be stronger in on those types of runs. A guy like Jam Miller is more of your off-tackle guy, pin and pull, outside zone, get him out there in space, let him make a move. One of the better running backs in the country when you can utilize him that way, which Alabama's done a fantastic job of doing that this year. But I think with everything becoming more consistent with Caden Proctor getting back, Elijah Pritchett playing against Wisconsin, getting your interior back together with Tyler Booker, Parker Brailsford, and Jaden Roberts, this could be the type of game. Now, granted, a lot of people are going to say, okay, you're going to try to run right at Georgia's defense. In some ways, I think they will. Yeah. I think they will attack the perimeter, especially with Jalen Milroe. But I think as far as having a balance between inside-out running, I think Justice Haynes is by far your best bet to get that done, even though I think Jam Miller can also do a lot of that too. They both can do both. It's just I would say one leans a little stronger in one area compared to the other.
Yeah, interesting. So it'll be fun. So what? So you're going to go with Justice Haynes, or are you saying Jam? You're saying Jam.
I am going to go ahead and stick with Jam, but I think that's
we're in the same. What you're saying is we're in the same on the same side of the.
Yeah, and I actually think both guys could end up having a huge game.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're, it's going to be one or the other. Granted, if you're getting one or the other, or if you're getting both, really, and you're getting Jalen Milroe, we think his legs are going to be effective. I mean, are they going to be able to get both their running backs going, their quarterback's legs, and get the passing game going? If they do that, then they're pretty much going to have their way with Georgia's defense. So they're probably not going to get something done on that front, but I think that's really interesting.
I think that when you look at this matchup, and I want to get your opinions, to me, it comes down to three things. And great to see all you guys in the comment section, by the way. You're getting a lot of happy birthday greetings.
And I very much appreciate it.
34.
29.
Unbelievable.
I don't know why you'd be lying on me like that.
Yeah. So, turnovers.
Yes.
Got to win the turnover battle.
Yes.
For Bama's defense, they're going to get their yards. But don't give up the touchdowns. Make them settle for field goals. And for Alabama on offense, they've got to continue third down efficiency, which has been brilliant, and scoring touchdowns in the red zone, which for all those people that want to talk bad about Jalen Milroe, he's the reason why. Because you have to defend his legs, and he can run it in himself, he can hand it off, or he can throw it. There's three different real options that you have to defend, and Alabama has scored a ton of touchdowns this year in the red zone.
I think red zone's really important in this game.
Yeah.
Because Alabama's been very effective at when they get in the red zone, they're putting up touchdowns. I mean, how many times have we heard Graham Nicholson's name this year?
None. That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, and he's missed, the field goal attempt. I mean, but that's, I'm still have plenty of confidence in him. It's just Alabama's done a really good job of converting red zone trips into touchdowns. That has to continue. You can't settle for field goals in a game like this because it really is one of those situations. It kind of felt like last year there were times where there were some opportunities for Georgia. They ended up having to settle for field goal, and that ends up playing a huge factor, especially when you are talking about the turnover battle. And that's one thing that I'll give Jalen Milroe a lot of credit for. He's made tremendous improvement as far as not turning the football over.
Right.
He in these types of games, if you look at Georgia last year, if you look at Texas, if you look at Michigan, all these college football playoff caliber teams, he hasn't always been the best or at his best in these types of games. But one thing that I think he has done a really good job of, at least post Texas, he did not do a good job of it, and that's protecting the football, and he's got to be able to do that against Georgia. I think Alabama should have some opportunities to maybe get one or two. They can't be coughing the football up and handing momentum to Georgia, because that is one thing. It's all about capturing momentum.
Yeah.
It's easier to capture momentum when you've got a home crowd at your back. Things like turnovers are going to be, one of the top ways to get that done.
Yep. So those are three things to look for Alabama to win this game. Now, this is also a huge, enormous game for high school prospects, for recruiting. And the one guy that I couldn't wait to get to see, or at least hear about his trip to Tuscaloosa, was defensive lineman Justice Terry. And now, because of the hurricane, they've switched. He's got to play football on Saturday, so he's not going to be there. But there's still a ton of guys there, man, that are going to be in town. And a lot of recruiting of these 4- and 5-star elite blue chip prospects comes down to Alabama and Georgia. And I think the way that you perform in a game like this matters, especially if you're Alabama and maybe they don't have the relationship with Kalen DeBoer that they used to have with Nick Saban, that they have with Kirby Smart. I think that you can really make up some ground with a great weekend and a great Saturday.
Yeah, it's a statement game. And it's a statement game for a number of reasons. Obviously, with the current team, the way it's perceived. But as far as recruits, this is kind of your opportunity if you're Alabama to say, hey, Nick Saban's no longer here. He's still in the building. You'll still see him from time to time. He's still involved. But this is Kalen DeBoer's show now. And that's not going to be any sort of significant drop-off.
Right.
And I think that, if you lose this game, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that there is going to be some sort of significant drop-off. I still think both of these teams are making the college football playoff, and they're both going to be really, really good football teams. Better football teams.
And they might play again.
Yeah, absolutely. Better football teams at the end of the year. But, yeah, when you talk about sending a message, I think that's really important. Mick, you got anything else before we hop out of here, brother?
Look, that's it, man. I'm looking forward to Keelan Russell, the 5-star quarterback, our man Caleb Cunningham, interviewed him a few times, the 5-star wide receiver who didn't see what he wanted to see at Auburn. Let's show him what he wants to see in Tuscaloosa on Saturday, man. But Ty Haywood and Big Mike Carroll and all these guys that have committed to Alabama, the number 2 class, and then, seeing maybe who they add to it. But great to get to talk to you. And also, man, got to say that the show's brought to you by mybookie.ag. Promo code NEXTROUND. Use that to double your initial deposit. And make sure that you're a part of Cover Crimson. If you get the annual subscription, you get the T-shirt to go with it. You and I both love those T-shirts. And then get on the message board, man. We're going to be talking about this game. You're cranking out a lot of content, so check both of those out. Happy birthday again. Thanks to Tyler, and we'll talk to you guys later. Roll Tide, everybody.